Hi, I'm David Miller, and this is the fifth of 7 mini-lectures on Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream. Today we're going to map the action of the play. Here is the outline we'll use for mapping the action. The first thing to notice is that A Midsummer Night's Dream follows the generic pattern of romantic comedy. It focuses on young lovers whose desires are blocked by cruel circumstances, arbitrary laws, or rigid social customs. In Shakespeare's comedies, such lovers flee the city into a green world of magic, poetry, play acting, and good luck. There, the lovers undergo some sort of testing that lets their love prove itself. When it does, good luck kicks in, removing the external obstacles once all internal obstacles have been resolved, and the young lovers return to the city, which has itself been transformed into a setting more hospitable to the values of romance in its various senses. These are the values of love, magic, courage, fidelity, and wonder. The ceremony that restores these values to the city in Shakespeare's comedies is marriage, representing both personal fulfillment and social renewal. It's proverbial that comedies end in marriage. As Lord Byron writes in Don Juan, all tragedies are finished by a death, all comedies are ended by a marriage, to which he adds, the future states of both are left to faith. Byron was a quotable guy. A Midsummer Night's Dream resembles other Shakespeare plays that have both a main plot and a subplot. Both plots in this play are directed toward the concluding marriage of Theseus and Hippolyta. In the main plot, Theseus tells Hermia she has until the wedding day to decide between marrying the despised Demetrius or retreating into a nunnery, which in comedy is pretty much the equivalent of death. Oberon and Titania, meanwhile, have flown in to celebrate the impending wedding. In the subplot, the mechanicals go into the woods to rehearse their play, which they hope to perform at the wedding. That's the basic framework, all set in motion by the first two scenes in Act 1. Both plot and subplot take place during the interval between the opening and the day of the Duke's wedding, and both character groups, the mechanicals and the young lovers, end their opening scenes resolving to leave the city for the woods on the following night. Act 1 contains just two scenes, one for the main plot and one for the subplot, and these scenes launch the action of the two plots along parallel tracks, destined to meet in the wedding of Theseus and Hippolyta. Naturally, it's the middle of the play where things get complicated. They tend to get more and more complicated until the climax of the action, which resolves the conflict and sets us up for a happy ending. In the middle section of this play, the complications get organized into paired scenes of awakenings. Not a bad motif for a play that calls itself a dream. I call them awakenings into confusion and awakenings from confusion. Hermia and Lysander fall asleep in the forest and awaken into confusion. Lysander abandoning the sleeping Hermia in mad pursuit of Helena, and then Hermia, bewildered, awakening alone to set off in search of Lysander. The second awakening in this series belongs to Titania, as she awakens into a dream-like state of infatuation with the transformed Bottom. In this odd moment, Titania is paralleled to Lysander, both under the influence of love potion number 9, while Helena, like Bottom, awakens to find herself the perplexed object of a sudden and inexplicable affection. Helena is untransformed, and so, in a sense, is Bottom. Aside from the donkey head, he's more himself than ever, and so naturally his name seems to fit him better than ever. Bottom in his metamorphosis becomes an ass. His self-possession offers a sublime counterpoint to the mad passions of the characters surrounding him. This completes the first series of awakenings. We may be tempted to say that the infatuations induced by the love potion are pure fantasy, in contrast to real true love, but that's not so obvious. The joker in the deck is Demetrius, who doesn't lose his attraction to Helena when the effects of the potion are removed. This hints that the effects of the magic juice may not be all that different from the ordinary craziness of falling in love. Both involve a lot of outlandish language and behavior, and both go back mythically to Cupid's arrow. The only real difference is that the magic juice can be controlled by third parties like Oberon and Puck. Shakespeare's much more likely to blur than to reinforce the differences between true love and infatuation, reality and illusion, waking and dreaming. The second series of awakenings, from confusion rather than into it, all depend on Oberon's antidote to the love juice. It's still magic, but now it returns the lovers to their senses. By the beginning of Act 4, all the characters have gone back to sleep. They awaken now to wonder at the strangeness of the night's events, and even to doubt their reality. You know what it's like to wake up from a dream and try to recall what happened even as it is slipping away. The lovers experience just this tantalizing evanescence of memory, and Bottom's awakening, with its garbled echoes of St. Paul in Corinthians, offers a sublime parody of the experience shared by the lovers. Together, this paired series of awakenings clearly frame the middle section of the play and prepare us for its conclusion. Act 5 takes us back to the Duke's palace, but it's a very different scene from the one the play began with. The couples are married, but it's too soon to go to bed, so they need something to do, something to postpone and substitute for the act of sex. The solution to their problem is the play prepared by the Mechanicals, the most lamentable comedy and most cruel death of Pyramus and Thisbe. This play within the play is one of the funniest things ever written, but for all the broad humor, it has a complex relationship to the larger play that contains it. It mirrors the main plot, in which lovers flee from the city to the woods because their desires are blocked. At the same time, it mirrors the action of Romeo and Juliet, which I described in the last mini-lecture as sort of a companion piece to A Midsummer Night's Dream. The lovers are kept apart by a feud between their families, and their rendezvous turns into a double suicide. In this way, Shakespeare's little theatrical travesty manages to combine a tragic analogy to the comedy with a comic analogy to the tragedy. In the Mechanicals' performance, we also see the spirit of the woods follow the young lovers back into the city. All the passion and confusion of the preceding night return, now in a thoroughly comic vein. The spirit of the woods does encounter some resistance. Theseus, the skeptic, doesn't believe a word of what the lovers have told him, but then he doesn't seem to remember either that he once had a love affair with Titania himself. He is the waking mind with no recollection of its own dreams. His speech offers a pointed contrast to Bottom's awakening, for the weaver, in spite of his confusions, doesn't simply forget the dream he can't describe. He remembers it vividly, and it produces hilarious confusions in his speech. After the married couples trail off to bed, the fairies enter to bless the marriages. Now the woods really have come to the city, as the spirit of magic, love, and theatrical illusion rules over Athens in its sleep. Puck's epilogue, spoken directly to the audience, suggests that the end of the play will be their awakening. He wittily questions the distinction between waking and sleeping, suggesting that if you didn't enjoy the play, we'll just say you slept through it. Theatrical illusion, in Puck's view, partakes of both waking and sleeping. It's like dreaming wide awake, and if you don't get it, you might as well just roll over and go back to sleep. It seems appropriate that this mini-lecture should have an epilogue as well. Our last two mini-lectures on Shakespeare's play will focus on the themes of imagination and theatrical illusion. So Professor Miller's epilogue will serve as a bridge from this overview of the play's action to the topics we're going to consider next. A word before you go, then, about chronology. Remember the play's opening lines. Theseus says, "4 happy days bring in another moon." And Hippolyta replies, "4 days will quickly steep themselves in night. 4 nights will quickly dream away the time." The events in the woods take place on the evening of the second day. Lysander says to Hermia, "Steal forth thy father's house tomorrow night." And she replies, "Tomorrow I will truly meet with thee." In the next scene, Peter Quince hands out parts to his actors, saying, "Con them by tomorrow night, and meet me in the woods." Clearly, Shakespeare is giving the time scheme a lot of emphasis with these repetitions. But do the math. If the events in the forest occur on the second night, then the marriages that follow must take place on the third day, not the fourth. What happened? Hippolyta gives us a clue. 4 nights, she says, will dream away the time. Now, that same notion of dreaming away time appears again when Theseus in Act 5 asks for entertainment. He's still just as impatient as he was in his opening speech, even though the length of time he has to wait has shrunk from 4 days to 3, and then to this long age of 3 hours. He even refers to the entertainment he's asking for as an abridgment, naming it by its effect, which is to shorten time. Sure enough, 300 lines later, roughly 15 minutes of stage time, Theseus is announcing that it's midnight. This is Shakespeare's hidden joke, commenting on his own abridgment of 4 days into 3. And it's his testament to the power of dramatic illusion, which can expand or contract time at will. After all, if Shakespeare can compress 4 days into 3 hours of stage time, then compressing them into 3 days of elapsed plot time is nothing. My goodness, are we already out of time? I'll get back to you in the next mini-lecture with more on the themes of fantasy and theatrical illusion.